Hey, Ward Jene Stroud here. Welcome to painting a sea turtle with Brusho crystal powdered watercolor. I know this is a hard time with the pandemic and being quarantined, and a lot of you are taking your first steps as artists, watercolor artists. So I wanted to make a video that's fairly simple and will hopefully inspire you to try some new things. So the first thing we're going to do, I've sketched out this little fella on Arches 140 cold press, bright white paper, and I'm just laying down a really soft loose wash. I put a bunch of water on there, just clear water, and I'm going in with some yellow ochre and a little burnt sienna. These are American Journey paints from Cheap Joe's Art Stuff. We love them. And my whole purpose for this first wash is just to lay in some nice background colors. So here's a little Andrews turquoise for the kind of like a watery effect. And I'm not over painting this a whole lot. I'm not going to go back in and paint, move the pigments around. Pretty much just laid it down. I'm going to leave it go and let it just do what it does. If you get out of watercolor's way and let the pigments work, they can do absolutely amazing things. Now, I'm going to take a tissue here, a piece of paper towel, and just where I want to have some highlights, I'm very gently going to lift off the paint. And if some of the edges keep some of the background color on them, that's great because it can look like reflected color, and I don't want the sea turtle to look like it's been cut out. So by painting over it and then going back in and just lifting off where I want some highlights, it'll integrate itself with the background. This is an 11 by 15, or what we call a quarter sheet, and I've got it on what's called a gator board, which is kind of like a foam core board but much stiffer. It's waterproof. They're wonderful to paint on, and I just taped it down with some DIY tape so it stays nice and flat and it doesn't buckle when it gets wet. So this is the first wash, and this is going to have to dry completely dry before we go on to the next step. Now I'm going to take a soft brush. I'm using an Old Faithful number 10, just a good standby brush, a good go-to from, again, Cheap Joe's. And I'm coming along to soften out some of these edges and just lift a little bit of the color. But as always with watercolor, less is more. Just using nice clear water. Notice I'm not holding my brush super choked up like you would a pencil. I tend to hold the brush about midway. I call it the Harry Potter, think of a conductor conducting the orchestra. You want to hold your brush a little bit more toward the end. And when you want more control, though, you can move your hand down the brush a little bit, and you'll have a lot more control. Let's see how that background's just kind of softening and blending together. Just magic. Everyone says that watercolor is difficult, and it does have its challenges, but the things that it does, the organic way that it works, it's also worth it. So I let that completely dry. When you see that little ripple effect, I mean some time's gone by. And now for the next part, I'm going to use, again, just clear water. And I've got some Brusho dark brown. I'm only going to be using one color today. And part of the reason for that is with Brusho, with a crystal powdered watercolor, each of the colors has a lot of matching or complementary colors mixed in with it. So even if you use just one color, you're going to get about 10 different amalgamous colors mixed in with it. So it all has harmony. And I want to keep with the earth tones of the sand or the ocean floor here. So that's why I went with the browns and the warms. So I always say it's hard to control the powder, but it's easy to control the water. So by putting down clear water here, I'm literally painting with just water. because I know wherever I put these little droplets of water, wherever the brush lands, when I sprinkle the powder on in a moment, it's gonna just explode with color. And this gives me so much control. And that's why you'll see me also here choking up on the Brusho. So I'm a little bit more careful with this part. I'm just going to drop in little drops and try to simulate the scales. What an amazing creature the sea turtle is. I've had friends tell me of experiences where they swam with them. I'm very envious. Kind of guess the trick here is while blending the turtle in from the background so it doesn't look like it's just cut out and pasted on there, at the same time you want it to stand out also and have some contrast. Now when I put this water down, I'm actually putting drops down because I know as I start this, if I put a lot of water down at the beginning, by the time I get all the little shapes filled in with water, the ones that I started with will be starting to dry. And I'm actually painting this in Yuma, Arizona, and it's 107 degrees out today. So it's pretty warm inside the paint mobile. And so yeah, things are drying very quickly. Of course, I've got air conditioning and I'm in a covered place, so it's not like I'm exposed to the bright, hot sunlight, but it is warm and things do dry and there's not much humidity here. That would make a difference. But see, I'm taking my brush, I'm painting just the little shapes. And again, wherever I put this water down, I know that's where, when we sprinkle the powder on, it's gonna be so much fun. You're gonna love this. You know, I always try to share with people that, as with anything in life, everything is a journey. There's no there. You're only here, and if you ever do get there, it'll just be another here. So think of your painting, if you're just starting out, as a journey, and you're taking the first steps. And believe me, if the world falls away for just a moment as you paint, and you forget all the ups and downs of life, you've won. It'll never get any better than that. No matter how talented you get or how masterful you become, it never gets any better than just the first time you sit down and paint, if you're in that moment. So I'm going to start on this other, is it a fin or a leg? I think it's a fin. And just trying to do the little shapes. You don't need much space to paint or to make a studio. I travel around the country in a 21-foot RV, and sometimes I paint outside and then the whole world's my studio, but right now I'm sitting at a little table inside a mini Winnebago, and the whole world comes to me here. So if you have just you have a little spot, you can make a sacred space. You'll have a studio and you can sit down and just paint. Ooh, this is where it gets exciting. I actually get kind of giddy at this point, just before putting on the Brusho, dropping the powder in. It's always fun, and I just can't wait to see the result. And you can see this has taken a few moments, so again, when I started, I was putting down almost drops of water. It was just standing, because I knew that would dry as I was finishing up the other shapes. And I may go back and add a little bit more water to it. So there's your dark brown Brusho. Gosh, and one of those little pots will just last you forever and ever and ever. Now, I don't just sprinkle the Brusho right on out of the pot because you can overdo it. So I put it on a little piece of paper first so I can deliver it more gently into my image. That gives me a lot more control that way. And again, you want to do this like you're seasoning your favorite chili, and you're using a ghost chili, and you don't want to overspice it too much. You're gonna always add a little bit more. Isn't that fun? Now that's gonna spread and move around a little bit, but we're gonna help it out too. And this is where you have to be a little bit careful. You don't want to disturb too much. You want to kind of, again, get out of the way and let the particles and let the paints do what they do. But I'm going to keep a nice wet brush and go in and just here and there touch it up a little bit, where maybe it didn't get enough water, or I just want to accentuate a little. But if you go in and just paint everything, you'll lose the Brusho effect, which is, the textures that you get are just super exciting. So really, the less you do of this, the better. But it definitely needs a little bit of help here and there. But yeah, more is better. Notice I've got the brush choked up pretty good. I want some control here. This is almost like detail work. There'll be times when I do this when I won't touch the Brusho once I put it down at all. But for this little guy, he needed a little extra help. And I'm almost giving it just a little bit of definition there. If you have any comments or any questions, I'd love to hear from you. My email is ward@artofward.com, and my website's artofward.com. I have a YouTube channel, YouTube/Ward Stroud, and I always love to hear from people there. I've got a whole series of videos there, all free for you to watch. And if you go through Cheap Joe's website and their YouTube channel, I've got a whole bunch of really, really wonderful videos, very in-depth, start to finish, and we've done a huge collection. Mostly want to do this video today because it's been a while since I've done one, and again, I know there's a lot of new artists, and if anything good has come out of the pandemic and the coronavirus, I mean, I'm looking for silver linings. The fact that people are picking up paintbrushes and learning to express themselves, or found the time and the motivation to express themselves, and I think that's just fantastic. So welcome to the club. See, I'm giving just the tiniest little bit of definition, but a lot of times I'm really not even painting, like mopping around like you'd mop a floor with the brush. I'm just taking a little extra water and dropping it into each little shape, because those little shapes are what give this life. Kind of like the shapes on a giraffe. I always say all painting boils down to really just three things: shapes, which we see here; edges, which are like a hard edge, kind of like like a mountain against the sky. That's a hard edge. Or soft edge or lost edges, where they just kind of blend away, like you see in the background here. So shapes, edges, and then values, how light and how dark something is, and the contrast against each other. Now, if you leave the water in the Brusho, they will eventually homogenize or blend together, and they'll lose that beautiful texture and interest. So I just took a tissue there and just gently did the capillary thing, wicked up the extra moisture, so it'll keep its interesting shapes, all those nice little particles, that beautiful texture that Brusho does. And some final little details there. And then so it's dried, and now I'm making extra sure that it's super dry, because you would never want to smear this. You know, before you do this part, please make sure your paint is dry. And I'm going to take just a piece of paper towel, and I'm going to slough off all the extra particles, all the extra crystals. As we do the next part, I don't want those the crystals that are still on there to bleed, so I can paint right over them. So I gently but vigorously knock those off. And now I want to tip the board up, because we're going to move from the brush up part of this into the painting part. There we go. That might be a little bit steep. There, that's a little bit better. So the next part of our little project is going to be to add some depth, to add some shadows and some darks. And again, I'm just trying to keep this very simple. I don't want to get too detailed. So I'm going to mix some French ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna, and this is how I make my darks, my blacks. And if I want a cooler black, I can add some cobalt blue to it, or if I want a warmer dark, if that makes any sense, you can add a little bit of cobalt red or some crimson. But I want a nice cool dark. And here we're going to go in, and this is really a super fun part of this, because it's like sculpting almost. By adding darks, you push things in and you make other things come forward. So I'm going to go under this shell to give that some dimension. And right around this leg and under the neck here, just a little bit. And I'm using pretty thick paint. There's a language now that painters are using, and I believe it's a lot in part because of the amazing and wonderfully talented Joseph Zbukvich. He describes painting thickness and paper dryness in terms of coffee, tea, milk, cream, and butter. So your lighter washes, or your thinner, more see-through washes, would be like a tea consistency, very weak wash. And then on the opposite end of that scale would be like the cream or the butter consistency, where your paint is thick, almost like toothpaste. And each has its different effects. So where I went in with dark color up there, because I really wanted it to be nice and dark, so you almost can't even see into it. That was a cream or kind of a butter consistency. And now here on the shadow, I'm going to bring it back to almost a milk consistency. I mean, I want a good shadow, but I want it to be a little bit translucent. So, but it is important that we can talk about consistencies in a language that we understand. We all know what a coffee or a tea would be, nice and weak, or water would be see-through. So here, the reflective shadow down in the sand I'm doing with, let's say it's milk. It's definitely darker than tea or coffee. And I want the shadow to be very defined. And I'm actually kind of going down the paper in what's called a bead. So as I paint, I leave a little bead of paint which gives it a nice blending effect. I'm going to go right under this fin and then kind of just trail off on the edge. And I'm holding the brush about midway. I want some control, but I also want it to be very painterly. But notice how I'm working down the page, down the paper, and it's tilted at an angle, so gravity is helping me form that bead. There's that real dark. Now I want to go in with just almost a butter consistency right under the very, very belly of the shell, so it'll have a really dark, what I call bedbug dark. It's so black you can't see into it with your eyes. That totally lets your imagination, your viewer, just kind of get lost inside of something. It's so dark that you can't see into it. Now I'm going to soften out some of these edges and some of these darks. And I'm not super happy with the shadow. I think it's a little too defined. So it needs a little love. Detail is always really important too. So we're going to drop in the eyes here again with that ultramarine blue and burnt sienna dark. Nice black. And now notice I'm doing this fine detail. I'm holding my brush almost like a pencil at this point. I want to have a lot of control because these lines are important. There's the mouth. And it gives a lot of definition to this wonderful being. Isn't it amazing how this is just coming to life? Adding these darks has made it three-dimensional. And really, we've kept this process pretty limited. Now, speaking of consistencies, I'm going to use a almost coffee, a very light wash. I wanted some shadow, but I want to keep that nice light edge. So I'm going over this very carefully and not scrubbing, just kind of glistening over with a coffee consistency. And a nice light wash just to give it some shape. And you have to remember too, with watercolor, things dry. And they dry much lighter. So while this looks a little intense right now, I know that when it dries, it is going to soften out somewhat. And here's where I'm softening out the edges just a little. And this is kind of the process now of just sculpting and forming and shaping. I want to give a little shadow to one side of the face, but I don't want to lose that eye. This is almost a tea consistency because I really don't want to do a whole lot. I'm very careful to leave a little white space along the edge of the mouth to keep its definition, and then just a little shadowing just on the bottom there. I hope you'll give this a try. I hope this is inspiring you. Painting is a lot of fun. It can transport you to other worlds. It can be a fish or a horse or a sea turtle on the bottom of the ocean, all while sitting at your kitchen table. Here's where I'm going to soften that shadow out just a little bit. And again, that was just a little too defined, so it's not quite dry yet. I'm going to take a tissue and just kind of just soften a few of the edges up just to give it some feeling. I'm using the Old Faithful brush again, one of my favorites. It's a synthetic, so affordable and so fun to use. And if I were shipwrecked on a desert island, I'm not sure what brush I would choose, but it might be one of these. Of course, signing a painting, always one of my favorite moments. And there I'm using a lizard lick, which is another fabulous brush from Cheap Joe's. It's great for doing fine detail, which I'm going to do. I'm going to touch up these eyes a little bit. And just a teeny tiny bit of detail. I love this painting. It's not overpainted. And really just a few simple steps managed to make a piece of art. Hopefully somebody will love someday. I know I've loved painting it. Yeah, I'm just softening these edges a little more. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had fun watching. Please keep in touch.